because like the left kind of has difficulty in communication.
Absolutely.
I,
I
I'm sorry.
completely
I'm
agree with you.
sorry.
Oh, yes. No, if you're
Like,
talking to someone and they're like, guillotine the rich, ACAB, you're like, okay, what? It's like, if it's just memes, you're not going to convince anyone in the hearts and minds of people, right?
that's exactly right. And it goes beyond that as well. I think even um, those who fancy themselves as like great leftist communicators think that you always have to be super academic. You like just pull out Marx and, crack it open and just literally read Marx and that'll persuade people. No, that's not going to persuade people. Like
Yeah.
you need to have, like, it needs to be informed, of course, but don't be afraid of being entertaining.
I had a lot of things I wanted to ask you, and I know we've got a really limited amount of time. So before we get right into, obviously, the tea, which I know is the only thing that anyone cares about on my stream right now, could I quickly ask, it's weird for me to see what's going down in Georgia right now, obviously, because like as a Canadian, my voting process is like less than 5 minutes. I get up and I just, whatever the nearest polling station is, I walk in and I walk out. And then people tell me in America, you've got this thing where people apparently have to wait for hours at a time. And now they're not allowed to go to the bathroom, and now they're not even allowed to get water because that's going to be considered voter tampering. Can you explain that to me? Because it just sounds like a dystopian 1984 of sorts.
Right. I mean, it sounds dystopian, but this country has had such a long history of disenfranchising very specific groups of voters, particularly Black voters. And so, just to kind of give you a little bit of context into like my frame of mind when it comes to these types of issues, one of my favorite things to do is go back and watch old debates on YouTube, and they could either be presidential debates, vice presidential debates. I watched a debate where Malcolm X was debating someone on like some newsy type show, and I love those types of videos because what it really helps me grasp is, you know, we have the aesthetics of change when it comes to a lot of big issues, but at the core of our so-called democracy, a lot has remained the same, right? At the core of, corruption, we haven't really seen much of an upgrade or much of an evolution. We've certainly seen corruption in politics, money in politics become more regressive with certain Supreme Court rulings, Buckley v. Valeo, and Citizens United. Now I'm rambling. But my point here is what we're seeing in Georgia is really a more aggressive continuation of what we've already experienced. And when you have a political party that is so unpopular and refuses to take any real moment of self-reflection and maybe reform itself in order to appeal to voters, well, what they're going to do is they're going to try to game the system to their advantage to maintain power. And there's a part of the Republican Party, I can't stand what they're doing. I disagree with what they're doing, both politically and through, these efforts to disenfranchise voters. But you do have to give them credit for the passion. Like they are willing to do
I thought you were going to say
anything and
ruthlessness.
everything.
Yeah.
Ruthlessness, their passion, I mean, whichever word you want to use. But on one hand, you have the Democratic Party, which is full of countless feckless losers. And then you have the Republican Party that will do anything and everything to maintain power and to get what they want legislatively. The thing that made me want to pull my hair out more recently was just this unwillingness for Kamala Harris to overrule the Senate parliamentarian in order to include a $15 an hour minimum wage in the coronavirus relief package. Do you think Republicans would even think to debate whether or not they're going to do that to ensure some legislative win of their own? They're going to do whatever they want to do. They don't care.
Well, that's
but
the
instead,
argument
we
I've
have
heard.
Democrats.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask, when it comes to this, what about abolishing the filibuster? Because I've heard people push back against that, saying, well, if Democrats are to do that, then once Republicans are in power, they'll take way more advantage of it than Democrats ever would.
Yeah, I think that's it's a fair point, and I don't mean to minimize it. I think it's a serious thing to consider, especially when you have elections currently being rigged in Republicans' favor, right? So if it's easier for Republicans to win, it's more likely that they'll have a majority in the Senate. And so it is a legitimate concern. But first of all, there needs to be this is the time for the Democratic Party to push ahead aggressively to ensure that they protect our elections and pass what's known as HR1, the For the People Act. That's this giant election reform bill, right? If they can get that passed by doing away with the filibuster, and if we can ensure that we have free and fair elections, then absolutely we should get rid of the filibuster. We should get rid of the filibuster because this is what democracy is. Ensuring that we have 60 votes to pass legislation just means that legislation goes to the Senate to die unless Republicans are in charge, because they will find a way. By hook or by crook, they will find a way. Democrats love to abide by the rules, right? By the so-called rules, the arbitrary rules, the nonsense that they could easily overrule. But if this country really has any chance at survival, keeping any form of democracy intact, Democrats need to fight now. And I'm a little worried that they don't have that fight in them. I mean, just watching the way the $15 an hour minimum wage went down tells you everything you need to know about the Democratic Party.
That was gut-wrenching. Well, I mean, on that note, what are you thinking so far the first 100 days? Well, it's been beyond 100 days. What do you think about the start of Biden's administration so far?
You know, it's been a mixed bag, and I guess that's a lot better than how I felt after the first 100 days of the Trump administration.
Oh, dystopian
I
nightmare,
did not feel like it was definitely a nightmare. I have such low expectations for Joe Biden that I've been pleasantly surprised in some areas. For instance, he is the only sitting president that I can think of who has made a pretty bold statement in favor of an effort to unionize workers in Bessemer, Alabama. I know some people might think that's not a big deal. It's just a statement. It's not policy that actually leads to fundamental change. But I don't want people to discount the ripple effect that something like that has, not only in Bessemer, Alabama, but all throughout the country, where now you have Amazon workers in various states considering unionizing themselves. And that makes me really happy. I'm really glad that he put that statement out there. You also have his support for the PRO Act, which would, if it passes in the Senate, it would actually lead to, a far easier situation, a far easier environment for workers to organize. It would do away with these so-called right to work states. I mean, it's just such an important piece of legislation. And one other area where I've been surprised more recently is Biden's willingness to, in the very least, reform the filibuster. But he, kind of issued a threat during his press conference yesterday, indicating that if Republicans are going to continue being obstructionists, if they're going to continue being an obstacle to him accomplishing some of the policy goals that he has in mind, well, then he's going to go further than wanting to just reform it. Now, it might just be all talk. We'll see. But I also want to be clear with the audience that my expectations remain low. But I do think that he's shown a willingness to move a little closer to Bernie on some issues. And I do think that Bernie's the one who's influencing him behind the scenes. And clearly, he's been a good influence.
Yeah, Chairman Bernie now, as everyone calls him. I was going to ask then, what contrary to that has been disappointing you about Biden's administration so far?
His administration, his cabinet, his aides are full of, many of those people have very close ties to the corporate world, to big banks. I think Janet Yellen was not a great pick for Treasury Secretary. Someone who just made $11 million over the last 2 years by giving Wall Street speeches has no, in my opinion, has no role in the White House, should not have a role in the White House. There's the State Department, in my opinion, is probably the worst, where you have Lloyd Austin, who was just working for private military contractors, and now
he still owns like a significant amount of stock in Raytheon, I think, on top of everything else.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. So, I mean, his appointments have not been great, in my opinion. There have been a few people. I think Javier Becerra is a good pick for HHS. But I mean, that's the thing. people like Javier Becerra tend to be the exception, not the rule, in terms of the individuals Biden has chosen to fill his cabinet with and his administration with. Also, his foreign policy is awful. I don't think you're going to have an easy time finding a corporate Democrat who isn't going to use overblown and aggressive language toward China. And in terms of foreign policy, I think most of the emphasis moving forward is going to be on relations with China. And I'm not talking about diplomatic relations. Biden's rhetoric is very similar to Trump's rhetoric on China, and that worries me quite a bit. So, and then, of course, I mean, the COVID relief bill, it had portions of it that I was pleasantly surprised by. I don't have children, so I don't get to take advantage of the child tax credit, but my brother does. And, it's going to change a lot for him and his family. It's really going to provide some breathing room. So I love some components of the relief bill. I wish that it were permanent, and it appears that the Democratic Party is going to attempt to make that happen. We'll see how that goes. But I'm not happy with the fact that we haven't increased the federal minimum wage since 2009. And I've also gotten to a point where I'm far less interested in these congressional races and far more interested in listening and learning to discussions and conversations about organizing workers. Because the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter how progressive a lawmaker is. If they don't fear the people, then they're not going to do anything, right? And our progressive lawmakers clearly don't fear the people because the people are not organized. Workers are not organized. So we need to, increase union power in the country, labor power in the country, and I think that's really the only way we're going to get anything accomplished.
You don't have to give anything away, but is this like the opening salvo for a TYT general strike kind of organizational thing? I mean, obviously, I don't want to put you on the spot, but. Because I often, in all seriousness, I think about things like this, and then I'm not that like TYT is like, all right, everyone follow us, but I'm like, I don't have a big enough a megaphone, but I've always wondered if there was something that the progressive media, like yourself, the Majority Report, if everyone could coalesce and be like, we should organize to do something in order to help out the workers, like, what could that look like, maybe? But I don't want to put you on too much pressure. It's not like.
No, I don't feel any pressure at all. Feel free to ask me anything. It's funny. I haven't really like TYT as a company. I know it looks like it's this giant company, and to be fair, we have built this incredible audience. But if we were to go on general strike, I don't think that would accomplish much. I think that the organizing is much deeper than that. And so Nando Vila, my co-host on Weekends for Jacobin, we talk about this a lot, both on air and off the air. And it's so important that Bessemer unionize, okay? Because having Amazon workers unionize, I mean, that is a big deal. I mean, you were talking about, I think Amazon is the largest employer in the United States. Getting those workers unionized,
900,000 employees, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to get more bang for your organizing if you focus on some of these more monopolistic companies. So I love seeing what's happening with Bessemer. I think the PRO Act is so incredibly important, and it's pretty gross that our media doesn't focus on it nearly enough. But once you kind of shift your focus away from relying heavily on lawmakers to do the right thing, and you focus more of your energy on organizing and what organizing can accomplish, that's where you find a little more hope, to be honest with you, because corporations, corporate donors, they have more power. They have the power of money to persuade and influence these lawmakers. We can't really compete with that, right? Like, we're not bringing in millions or billions of dollars every year, but we have people. And I think the anger is palpable. People really want change in the country. And rather than going on Twitter and whining about how this lawmaker or that lawmaker hasn't done enough, which, by the way, yields no results. Talk to your colleagues, talk to your coworkers about what you can do in your workplace, and unionize, because there's power in numbers. And I think that's really the appropriate way to go about this. Lawmakers aren't going to do things out of the kindness of their own hearts. And to be quite honest with you, the kindness in their hearts doesn't even matter. What matters is what kind of power people have to push these lawmakers to pass the policies that we need.
What do you think about some of the more progressive policies, like beyond $15 minimum wage, the Green New Deal, Medicare for All? Does that have any hope within the Biden administration of being passed, or is that something that has to go grassroots all the way up?
I think that there's no chance that Medicare for All will pass. Well, it might pass even in Congress, I think
Mhm.
that it's a long shot, but Biden has said on multiple occasions that he would veto Medicare for All. So while Biden's in office, we're not going to get Medicare for All. Same with the Green New Deal. I don't think that's going to happen either. The real question is, will Biden do what's necessary to kind of lay the groundwork to make it easier for the left to accomplish its agenda? And the filibuster is a big part of that. Increasing labor power or making it easier for workers to organize is a big part of that. And I'm really happy that we're able to have that conversation now, as opposed to having the kinds of conversations we were having when Trump was in office.
In terms of, you said that the Chinese rhetoric is being ramped up a lot, and I totally agree with you. When it comes to both Democrats and Republicans pushing that messaging, that kind of puts progressives in an awkward spot, especially with like xenophobic attacks being at an all-time high in both, Canada and in America. What do you think the pathway forward for progressives should be in order to try and counter all that?
Well, I mean, it's important to understand that the fear mongering about China is really based in this zero sum game perception of hegemonic power, right? And so China is a rising power. There's no question about it. And the United States is afraid of losing that the power that we've had right now. Of course, we continue to maintain our power through spending an insane amount of money on our military, and I don't think that's going to change. But China has increased its investment in its military as well. And so I think that for progressives, my take is, and I would say for progressives in the left, it's really important to maintain your credibility by acknowledging that two things can be true. Number one, engaging in any hostile or militaristic way against China is a bad idea, and we should not do it under any circumstance, unless they're an imminent threat to us, and they're not. Okay. However, with that said, I think that it's also important to acknowledge human rights abuses, not use human rights abuses as an excuse to engage militarily, but to acknowledge that human rights abuses are happening, and then also take a good hard look at our own human rights abuses, because
Yeah.
we certainly have plenty of them.
Yeah.
We're experiencing it at the border right now as we speak. I know that there are no media cameras allowed to show what's happening in those migrant facilities, but it's pretty bad.
They're called happiness centers now. I think they changed all that. So, yeah, we fixed it.
It is pathetic. It is pathetic how much the standards change depending on who's in office, right? So if children were being treated horrifically by the Trump administration and the media was critical of that, they should have been critical about that. Cool, but don't change the script just because someone who gives you this feeling of niceness is in office now. I mean, and it's a difficult situation, right? I mean, I don't know if you watched any of the press conference that Biden was in yesterday, or Biden
I
gave
did, yeah.
yesterday. The question about the border crisis came up over and over and over again. I feel like that's the only thing the reporters cared to ask about. There were no questions about COVID, by the way, which was not good. But
Odd, but
yeah, I mean, it's a global pandemic and people are still dying. But okay. But what I found interesting is how they just wanted Biden to commit to either saying, well, I mean, he's committed to saying that he will not deport unaccompanied minors. And they wanted to act like they just wanted him to say that eventually he'll deport them. And I don't really understand why that's the take, right? These are kids whose, families sent them to the United States through an incredibly dangerous journey. And the only reason why any parent or any family member would do that is because the situation at home is so dangerous that they were willing to take that risk. And so I get that there's in America, because of this capitalistic system, we have like this artificial scarcity drilled into our heads. And so everyone's constantly panicking about limited resources. And oh my God, what are you going to do? Are you going to ever deport them? Or are you just going to let them into the country? Like everyone just needs to relax for a second. And Biden also needs to decide, right? Is he going to be a hardline anti-immigrant president, or is he going to be this man of compassion, a man who believes in dignity? You know, I feel like he's kind of straddling the middle ground on the immigration issue, and it's a problem because he's losing on both sides. And Republicans don't care. Republicans are going to criticize him no matter what he does. He could literally deport every single person who tries to come into the country, and then some, people who have been in the country, and Republicans still wouldn't be happy. My suggestion would be ignore what the GOP has to say. He has slim majorities in both the House and the Senate. Please flex your power and don't be afraid to be popular. I think that's the thing with Biden. There was an Axios piece yesterday that gave me a little bit of hope, because apparently something that Biden gets excited about is when people say that he's bolder than Obama was. And
Actually, so that's the card we got to play. Just be like, oh, you're so bold today, sir. You could be even bolder if you only did this.
Oh, you're such a strong, bold president. No, but seriously, if he wants those carrots, I will give him more carrots than you can even imagine, right? So if that's the talking point that he wants to hear, let's give him that talking point. And to be sure, remember, Obama's stimulus bill after the recession was like $900 billion. So one-time stimulus bill. Biden did already come out of the gate with something bolder than that, $1.9 trillion. Yes, it was flawed. I already explained why. But he is also, you know, there are preliminary negotiations for an upcoming jobs and infrastructure bill. And that's likely to be a $3 trillion bill. And I'm excited to see what's going to be in it. And he seems to care about passing that bill deeply. So I think that it's important for the left to use the tactic of carrots and sticks, because I think sometimes we fall our own cynicism. And I'm saying this as someone who does this. Our own cynicism sometimes leads to us only using sticks. And when you do that, well, then what use does Biden have in listening to progressives or the left, right? If all we're ever going to do is avoid giving him credit for some of the decent things that he's doing. So go bolder. Don't be afraid to be popular.
I know with the kids in cages and the human rights abuses, though, that's something that people feel really helpless about, because you see, like, you'll see a photo or a picture and then you're just like, this isn't happening in my country. What do I do? Is there like a specific route or piece of advice you would recommend there in terms of like, you need to be writing to your senator, you need to be writing to your congressman, or like how does someone who feels utterly hopeless when it comes to the kids in cages thing try and help?
Well, I mean, I think there are two big things you can do. Number one, if these are issues that keep you up at night and you're passionate about them, I would start locally and run for office and get involved in politics, even if it's your neighborhood council. I mean, start small and work your way up. I think that there are so many wonderful people out there who actually see public office as a public service, and we need more of that. But as I said earlier, that's half of the equation. The other part is, okay, what can I do, right, to gather with a group of like-minded people, organize with a group of like-minded people, and really apply pressure to these politicians to ensure that they do the right thing, or else we're going to get them out of office. Like, lawmakers need to feel threatened by the left, and they don't right now. And I'm not talking about violent threats. I'm talking about their political careers need to feel incredibly unstable and vulnerable if they don't carry out what organized workers want. And again, we're not anywhere close to that, which is why the Bessemer story is such a big deal. But what I am noticing, not to be completely pessimistic, is this level of class consciousness that we did not have in this country 10 years ago. 10 years ago, people are watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians, thinking that these insane people flaunting their wealth is admirable.
Yeah.
and worth applauding. And people really thought like, no, no, we live in the greatest country in the world. That's going to be me in a few years. But I think people have really realized that that's not reality. In fact, this system is so broken that the least hardworking, the least talented, the least productive members of society, the most exploitative members of society end up becoming tremendously wealthy, while the rest of us work furiously every single day to continue building their wealth for them. And once people start seeing that dynamic clearly, I think that that's obviously a good sign. It's just that now we got to take that knowledge and put it into action.
Yeah, totally. I wanted to ask you a couple questions about your early days at TYT. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
What was it like? And more specifically, I wanted to be like, because I've only seen those original videos where it kind of looks like y'all are doing it out of a closet or something. Like, I don't know how TYT even came about. Like, did Jank like approach you and was he like, I'm the biggest like internet news guy that there's ever been, and you're like, what is internet news or something like that? Like, what was the origin story?
So I had no idea what TYT was, and I never applied to work there or anything like that. What happened was I graduated college, journalism school, and I started working for a CBS affiliate in Los Angeles. And I thought I was like the luckiest person on the planet. I got hired as an associate producer, and I absolutely hated it. I didn't like it, not only because of the role that I had there, but because once I sat back and took a look at what the ceiling was, like what's the best position I can have within CBS, that position sucked. It wasn't fulfilling. It didn't, if I made it to that position, which would be difficult and competitive, it wouldn't really give me any purpose. And I think even at a young age, I wanted to do something that felt worthwhile, because it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And if I'm going to be doing something, dedicating myself to something for literally decades, I want to feel like I'm providing something to society, doing something that's worth it. So I got really depressed and immediately did what I think most people do after graduating college and feeling unfulfilled. I applied for grad school. And I was like, maybe I need to get into politics. I love politics. And so I applied for a political science program. And then I got in, I was really excited, and I decided that I was going to go to Europe. It was the first time I was going to travel out of the country in my life. So me and my best friend booked a trip to Europe. We were going to go backpacking for a month. And then, you know, you don't make a lot of money as an associate producer. So I booked this trip on my credit card, and I was like, what am I going to do? It's probably not the smartest thing, but I did it. And a colleague of mine at CBS approached me and said, hey, are you interested in this like temp job at this company called the Young Turks? And at first I was like, what does the Young Turks mean? You know, I'm Armenian, and I thought that was a weird name.
Yeah.
And then she explained it to me, and she's like, it's this startup company, and it's, you know, it's a very unusual news program. And they call themselves the Young Turks because of how unusual it is. They're like rebelling against the way the news is done. And so I went home and I watched some of the YouTube videos, and I was like, okay, I can do this. This actually seems really interesting. And so she gave me the number for Dave Kohler, who's been at TYT since day one. He was the one who interviewed me. And literally the interview was this. Yeah, so you're interested in this job. It's going to be 2 weeks. You're going to fill in for our producer, JR. He's going to go on a vacation for 2 weeks. Can you do that? Yeah, I can do that. Can you come in at 3 a.m? Because they had the morning drive. They were on Air America Radio, which was on satellite radio at the time. So they had the morning show, and I just had to be there super early since they aired at 6 a.m. on the East Coast. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can come in at 3 a.m. Sure. It's only going to be 2 weeks. How bad can it be? And Lance, it's insane, because I show up that day, that morning. Dave Kohler walks me upstairs to where like this rinky-dink studio was. And as I'm walking upstairs, there's like human feces in the stairwell. Like, it was just not a great building, not the best area. I'm not even exaggerating. It was a big dookie, like right there in the corner of the stairwell. And
Oh,
I
the
was
lore.
like, what am I doing with my life? Why did I say yes to this? So then we walk into the studio and I saw that they had a set. It was a very outdated set, but it was a set. And I was like,
I remember
okay,
what it
maybe
looked
this place
like.
is
Yeah,
legit.
yeah.
Yeah, it was bad. It was so bad. And then he showed me how to turn the set on, had like little monitors on it. And before I knew it, Cenk comes in. He like rushes in. You know, he was always late, continues to cut it pretty close before showtime. And he's like disheveled. There's papers everywhere. I'm like, oh my God, this is a mess. What am I doing? And he sits down. This is 2007. He sits down and just starts railing about the Bush administration. And within 5 minutes, I knew that this was the place I wanted to be. Like, I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to be out of here in 2 weeks. I'm going to find a way to stay. And I want to do this. This is what I want to do.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I got really lucky. The 2 weeks were up. I asked Cenk if I could stay. They didn't have anything really available, but he asked if I knew anything about marketing because he wanted someone to help promote the show. And I was like, oh yeah, totally. Yeah, marketing. I can totally do. Don't know anything about
Yeah.
marketing. Tried, failed. Didn't even matter though, because as soon as I agreed to work with them, Air America went bankrupt, and the two other hosts decided to take other jobs. And now all of a sudden, there's an on-air position available, and no one wants to work at TYT because they have no money and they can barely pay you anything. And so Cenk was like, okay, here's what I need you to do. Air America just went bankrupt. We're losing two of our hosts. I need you to quit CBS, because I was still doing like both at the same time. And like CBS is this established thing, right? I don't have to worry about the stability of that business model. It's stable. It's going to be there forever. And then there's TYT, where it could fold next week. But when I asked him, like, well, what happens if TYT folds and I've quit CBS? And all Cenk said to me was, well, that's life in the big city. And that's not the most persuasive thing to say,
It's
but it
honest.
persuaded me. It's honest, and it persuaded me, and I quit my job at CBS. And then I started doing some producing and on-air stuff. Producing and on-air stuff for content that I didn't like very much, but I'm a scrappy little bitch, so I found a way to turn that show into what I wanted eventually.
Was one of the people who left Dave Rubin? Was that one of the two producers who walked away?
No. This is like early years of TYT. This is in 07.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah.
how did Dave get involved? That's the question I've been begging to ask.
So Dave got involved around 2012. We got picked up by Current TV, which doesn't exist anymore, but Current TV was interested in a television version of the show. So we were doing our online show, the television version of the show. I don't know where Dave came from, but before I knew it, Dave was in the studio and introduced himself to me, was very, very like charming, polite, persistent. Like, he was very persistent. It takes a lot for me to let someone in, and he would not allow me to just kind of brush him off. You know, he made a point to just be there and try to build some sort of relationship with me. And so we actually became very close friends. And he kept saying, I remember something he would say to me over and over again was, I just think you're so great. I think we can do great things together. And I can't believe that the flattery eventually got to me, but it did. And I let him in, and we would have dinner every weekend.
Oh, wow.
We were very close. And he did end up working for TYT, and he did a once a week 30-minute show it's still called The Rubin Report. But it was a very different show back then. And he has a partner who's also his producer, David Janet, and he would produce everything for Dave. And Dave would literally just get like a sheet of paper before his episode and just regurgitate whatever was on that sheet of paper. You know, he was my friend, so I always felt guilty about how I actually felt about his work ethic. But obviously, I never brought that up when we were friends. I just kind of like, some people work harder than others. It's fine. But I realized that our conversations really started to veer away from anything other than him wanting to get paid more. And then, he tried to convince me that I was underpaid. Toward the end of his stint at TYT, he never really talked to Cenk about any of this stuff, right? But when he would talk to me, it was clear that he was becoming increasingly bitter because he felt that he should have been paid more for what he was doing. But understand, TYT, like, especially then, I mean, not bringing in much money. And for people who were there, not 8 hours a day, but like 12 to 16 hours a day, like pouring everything into that show, we weren't getting paid six figures, not even close. And he wanted to get paid six figures for a once a week, 30-minute show that he didn't even produce himself. So finally he decided to leave. But before he left, he was trying to convince me to leave with him, which I'm not
He
dumb.
actually did a Jerry
So,
Maguire with you. Like, come on, who's coming with me? Who's
yeah,
coming with me?
it's true. And one of the things that actually, now thinking about it in retrospect, really bothers me is I had like a holiday party right before he left. And my husband was my boyfriend at the time, and obviously he was at the party. And he and Dave were like talking quietly to themselves, like off in a corner the entire night. And when everyone left, Christian like asked me like a bunch of weird questions about like the work environment at TYT, and he's like, are you sure that they're treating you right? Or do you think that they might be misogynistic? And I was like, what? I was like, believe me, if there was any misogyny going on, you would know about it. I would talk to you about it. Like, I'm really happy there. Why are you saying this? And Dave spent that entire party trying to convince my boyfriend that it was an unsafe work environment for me and that I should leave. And
Wow.
like, I think about that now, and it was so gross and weaselly for him to do that. But then obviously, based on what you guys can see for yourselves now, I mean, being gross and weaselly is his whole business model.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, were you surprised at all to see that arc? And it's the arc that conservatives seem to love because it's such a good narrative, right? Like, I used to be on the left, but then I realized the error of my ways, and now I'm changed. Like, was that
Yeah.
surprising, or what was it like? Well, that seems par for the course.
It was very surprising with Dave because he was
Oh,
actually my friend.
yeah, fair enough.
I actually trusted him. I shared holidays with him. Like, I remember he invited me to Seder. I'm not Jewish. I mean, I'm not religious at all.
Mhm.
But I love culture. I love, like, attending things like that and just observing and enjoying it. And so I just think about those like moments where he was just so close to my personal life. And I just didn't expect it, which is why when it happened, it was painful. It took 2 years for me to even muster like the ability to talk about it, which is why for 2 years straight, he was bad mouthing us, putting out all these lies about us. And all it would really do was like deeply, deeply hurt me. But I wouldn't talk about it publicly. I wouldn't like fight back publicly. And then when I finally did, I just blew up live on the show and I just told the truth about what really happened. And I think at that point, most people could kind of see it for themselves as well. But yeah, that was actually a painful experience. Like, I don't want anyone to think like, oh yeah, I was this big badass like the entire time. No, I went through a lot of pain because I considered him a close friend. So.
No, fair enough. I was also going to ask, like, Jimmy Dore and you and TYT seem to be at odds frequently. Like, there's usually a back and forth between, I guess, techniques or who's trying to achieve what, or the grifter card gets thrown back and forth and that kind of stuff. But you seem like a very cohesive unit, at least from what I saw from that era of watching the show a lot. Was there kind of like a singular vision, and then eventually you grew apart, like both you and the Jimmy Dore show, before it became its own separate entity?
Um, there were all sorts of things that were happening that I disagreed with, that I was deeply embarrassed by. I did not have a friendly relationship with Jimmy,
Okay.
certainly not like I did with Dave. And he seemed to carve out a very specific niche for himself and has decided to double down on it. And I don't really consider him a serious person. So I've decided that I'm not going to engage with it at all anymore. So he can go ahead and say whatever he wants. It's dealing with all of that is so time consuming and draining. And to be honest with you, what we do on a daily basis for that show is a monster. It's a mountain of work because it's not, oh, let's just pull up a few random articles and then read what it says and just share our thoughts on it. Like there's actual work that goes behind the production and the research into the stories we want to talk about. Because I don't trust any one news source, right? Like if there's a topic, I want to do a good job researching that topic so well that I cover all my bases. That takes up all my time. I don't have time to be on Twitter to see what the latest beef is. I don't really care what Jimmy's doing on his show. Look, to me, it's far more important to engage with even people who disagree with you. That's totally fine. I like it when I'm able to have a good faith debate or discussion with people who I disagree with because there's room to grow there. There's an ability and an opportunity to learn. But when you're dealing with people like Jimmy Dore, like what am I going to do? What am I going to do with that guy? Like he's claiming that I personally took, like at first it was 22 million, then it turned into $24 million from Jeffrey Katzenberg. Like he personally handed me tens of millions of dollars. I don't have a $2 million home. I live in a little condo that I was very, very lucky
are you
to
reinvesting the
save a down
24
payment
million?
for.
Where did the rest of the money go?
I mean, it's just ridiculous, right? And then I didn't know that NATO was like a corporate donor of some sort, but NATO was apparently paying me. Like it's just, I'm not going to mud wrestle with a pig. I have other things to do. So whatever he wants to do, let him do it. I don't really care. My hope is that people have minds and they can see the difference between someone literally just pulling up tweets on a screen behind him to talk shit about random people, or someone who actually wants to talk about these issues. And more importantly, bring like-minded people in to amplify their voices as well, which I think TYT does a really good job with.
With TYT, you went through a bit of a phase when the unionization project was happening. I remember for a while, and now it has grown into kind of its own little network. What would you say to other people who are trying to get into that same field? Because you have pretty much wrote the model in terms of like how to become an independent news network and become a successful business model at that as well. And I know you were saying in the start, it's really difficult. Like people expected us to make lots of money. It's like, we're a YouTube channel. We're not making a ton yet, but you have kind of turned it into something that is now like a progressive institution. How does one get to that point?
A lot of hard work and also just a willingness to accept the fact that there are two avenues you can go in, right? There's the avenue of profit seeking, money making, and if you're smart, hardworking, attractive, all of the stuff that you see in corporate media, competitive, you might be able to carve out a place for yourself in that world. But it is not fulfilling. It's a pretty gross place to be, and you're not going to have a sense of purpose. If all you want is to make money, go in that direction. But I think it's important that people are clear that going the independent route, well, actually, no, let me take a step back because it depends, right? I mean, there are independent people, like I know on Twitch, for instance, if you want to put out a Twitch show and it blows up, I mean, my understanding is you can make a lot of really good money. But if you want to build something bigger like TYT, I mean, I think Cenk is probably a better person for you to talk to because he's probably the least understood person on the planet. And I know him really well. We're more than just colleagues. Like I would say he's my best friend. We talk every day. And I wish people knew the side of him that I know because he's so selfless. Like he's insanely selfless. And there have been times where I get really angry with him because I've been there since 2007. There are a few people who have been there almost from the very beginning. And we know what the bad days look like. We know what it's like to work out of a crappy studio where there are leaking sewer pipes right above our desks, where we're getting paid virtually nothing. I mean, we were paid. My first oh my God, my first year's salary there was $29,000. Okay, that's out of college. That was my first salary.
That's a
So
teacher
there, I put
salary.
it out there. It is a teacher's salary, yes. But people have this idea that like, oh yeah, they took that big investment. And like, TYT employs dozens and dozens of people, provides health insurance, provides benefits for people. Like, it's I know personally, and he'd kill me if he knew I was sharing. I know Cenk has taken pay cuts to ensure that his employees get at least a small bump in their salaries.
That's
And
good.
so, like, while all this stuff is happening behind the scenes, right? And then one of the other things, this is where I was going with it. For me, it was always like, okay, we finally built this thing. Okay, let's reap the rewards, right? Like, why are we continuing to grow the company by bringing more people in and paying more people? Like, why don't we just keep things the way they are and then we all get paid more? Isn't that what we should do? And for Cenk, it's not about building something so you can get paid more. For Cenk, like, he wants to win. He wants progressive policies to win. He wants to get money out of politics. That's why he's not only doing this with TYT, he has like his rebel pack to actually put out some hard-hitting ads to get these crappy corporate Democrats out of office. He has Wolf Pack, which is, his effort to pass a constitutional amendment to get money out of politics. Like, he's Justice Democrats. He's the co-founder of that. He's constantly like pouring everything into what he feels is going to help advance the progressive agenda in America, even to the detriment of like his own personal life, his own income, his own everything. And so that's who Cenk is. And one other thing I'll say about Cenk, and don't get me wrong, like we have our disagreements and many people have seen them live on air. So he's not perfect. I'm not perfect. But one other thing about him is he will not censor you. Like he won't he has never once in the 14 years that we've worked together told me that I can't talk about a story or I can't share the point of view that I have on a story. When Jimmy was still with TYT and he was putting out incredibly embarrassing conspiracy theories that made me want to rip my hair out. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, so are we gonna allow this trash to exist on our network?
Was he a truther? I can't remember. Was he pushing that on your network?
Which conspiracy theory are we talking about here?
I meant like 9/11 trutherism, but
I mean, I don't think so. I don't know about 9/11, but the Seth Rich conspiracy theory was one of them.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Chemical weapons in Syria, that was another one of them. I mean, just embarrassing. So embarrassing, by the way, that I got turned down for a teaching job as a result of him being associated with me. So just putting that out there too.
Okay.
Yeah. Was not a fan of Jimmy's. I'm just going to be clear about that, even when he was with us. But my point in bringing that up is that it takes a lot for Cenk to pull you aside and tell you, that's not okay. Like, you shouldn't say that on air. It takes a lot. And I was angry about that in the context of Jimmy Dore. But now thinking about how much freedom and autonomy I have there, I get it. I get how that's actually more of an upside than a downside.
I can definitely disagree with a lot of Cenk's politics, but I think I speak for most people. I don't think he's ever really been considered like a grifter. Like, I've always thought of him as someone who actually does try and live by his own beliefs, even if I don't agree with him. Right? He's still principled in that. Like, I'll agree with you there.
What's also really great about Cenk is that he's not, I know it seems like he's hard-headed, and in some areas he might be, but he's a curious person and he's also willing to learn. And so one of the things that I love talking to him about is the PMC. And he loves that topic. And so, like, just give me some time, guys. I'm working on it. I'm working on radicalizing. It'll happen. Because he's a smart person. He's a smart and logical person. And so, and by the way, I am as well. And it wasn't until I met Michael Brooks and engaged in these kinds of discussions with him that I started moving further to the left. And so
really?
I know that if
I didn't know that. That's really cool.
100%. I remember when people used to come to me with like, late stage capitalism talking points, I'd like roll my eyes because because like the left kind of has difficulty in communication.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry.
Completely
I'm
agree
sorry.
with you. Oh, yes. No, if you're talking to someone and they're like, guillotine the rich, ACAB, you're like, okay, what? It's like, if it's just memes, you're not going to convince anyone in the hearts and minds of people, right?
That's exactly right. And it goes beyond that as well. I think even those who fancy themselves as like great leftist communicators think that you always have to be super academic. You like just pull out Marx and, you know, crack it open and just literally read Marx and that'll persuade people. No, that's not going to persuade people. Like you need to have, like, it needs to be informed, of course, but don't be afraid of being entertaining and funny and engaging. I think that's kind of missing from the left. Although, you know, I think Haas is doing a pretty good job. This show does a good job. So you're seeing more of that kind of content bubble up. But I guess my advice would also be try to see yourself as, I don't know if better is a good word, but above. Like try to see yourself as above the Twitter BS and drama. Like I think that drags us down, and I think we need to kind of get past that and focus on you know, engaging with our audience in a more substantive and productive way.
One of the last questions I want to ask you is, I know that Cenk ran for public office and unfortunately did not take it all the way. Is that something you could see in your future as well?
Probably not. There's just, I'm too open and honest about my life. And I think that in my opinion, harmless parts of my personal life would unfortunately get exploited to try to destroy me politically. And I'm not really, I would love to do it. That's the problem. Like as I grow, I feel more and more of an urge to enter that world. But then once I think about what they would do, who cares what they do to me? But like my family, I think about my family, I think about my husband. And when I considered running a few years ago, I talked to my mom about it and she begged me not to. And it's because she knows what they'll do to us. So, and we saw what they did to Cenk, you know, and it's crazy because I'm so close to him that watching them smear him like that and put out lies about him like that, it almost felt like a personal attack on me. Like I felt it with him. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so it was just it was like a hellish thing to go through. And I would not want to go through that again.
People in my chat are saying, we already have too many clips of her, Lance. Don't make her do it. I was like, fair enough.
Yeah.
I doubt there's anyone here who doesn't know who you are, but you want to plug yourself or your channel for everyone to know?
Sure. Yeah, I'm over at The Young Turks. We also have a Twitch channel, twitch.tv/TYT. So check us out there, and you can find me on social media, both on Twitter and Instagram at Anna Kasparian.
Anna, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks, Lance. This was fun. Happy to do it anytime.
Cool. Bye.
Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Can you do the thing, you know, that thumbs up and comment and all those things that help us out in the algorithm that controls every aspect of our lives? Also, if you happen to have a Facebook account, can you delete it? Like just delete it. You should probably delete your Facebook account because it's not a great company. But hey, if you can't do that for whatever reason, I understand. And could you also go to facebook.com/thesurftimes then and give us a little like and a follow. We're just trying to push back against the fact that people like Ben Shapiro happen to dominate the platform entirely. And when everyone asks, why do older generations believe the things they believe? One of the problems is the majority of them on social media use Facebook. So to counter that, we're just going to be on there too now. Also, if you happen to have a union or a worker co-op or even a leftist project, podcast, website, Zoom, MySpace, it doesn't matter. We will advertise it for free on this channel. All you got to do is go to weareserfs.com and use the forms that we got there, weareserfs.com. Thanks, everybody.
To our glorious gods, Xander Corvus and I'm Wrath, may you shower us with glory and smite our enemies. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we serve at your leisure, your grace. To our lords, Tofox, Bisexual Black Gamer, Jimothy K. Meeble Beeps Jr., Ryan Lubin, Trevor R., Jeffrey Lamb, Alexander Thaler, and Hans Josephine, we shall carry your banner high into the fields of battle. To our Knights of the Round Table, Timothy Hart, Trevor Janis, Lemmy 101, Anthropophagic, Saren 42, Chronic de Hemphog, Kale Kotka, The Great Pudini, Bone Jenny, Catherine, Radical Maniac, Ramon Acosta, Incosin, J. Fraser Cartwright, Thomas Barrington, Jimmy Bignuts, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Political Puppy, Andreas Chitoro, Gufalankius, Zach Christensen, Nicholas Marks, Yopi, Josh Mickelson, Melissa Murphy, Todd Buckingham, Todd Lajeunesse, Constance Joyce Lacheris. We lift our glasses of ale and we salute you.